Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 202 of Dial the Gates, the Stargate Oral History Project. My name is David Reed. John Gajdecki is joining us for this episode. He was the visual effects supervisor on Stargate SG-1 and Atlantis, so we've got hopefully a number of interesting stories heading your way here. I suspect John won't disappoint. Before we get into the thick of it, if you enjoy Stargate, and you want to see more content like this on YouTube, it would mean a great deal if you click the like button. It makes a difference with YouTube and will help the show continue to grow. Please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend, and if you want to get notified about future episodes, click the subscribe icon. And giving the bell icon a click will notify you the moment the new video drops, and you'll get my notifications of any last-minute guest changes. This is key if you watch live with us. And clips from this live stream will be released over the course of the next few weeks on both the Dial the Gate and GateWorld.net YouTube channels. As this is a live show, I have my moderators, I believe Tracy and Anthony today, in the chat, ready to take your questions for John as we go along. His specific episodes can be found at the Stargate command wiki, which is a really easy place to check out. And also, I really recommend checking out Gajdecki.com, which is really cool. It shows his action reel and environments reel off. Really cool stuff, man. John Gajdecki, thank you so much, sir, for joining me for this episode. It is a privilege to have you.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed. Now that I'm reaching the other end of my career and I look back, I have to say the Stargate days, the whole MGM days in Vancouver, which is where the shows were made, were actually really, really special. We had a lot to do. Sorry, I'm going to turn over my phone. Although
Sure.
I just got a text from Robert Habros, who is the effects producer for all of those shows. So it's actually, what's really interesting is all of the people, many of the people who worked on these shows, we stay in touch to this day.
Yeah.
In fact, we went over to Brenda Lavers, who was one of the coordinators, and we had dinner at her place 2 weeks ago. So it was a really special time for all of us. And I hope that was translated into a show that, I mean, clearly it was, that you guys are all still really interested in.
Christopher Judge called it Shangri-La. There was something that was really special about that group of people, you know, in front of and behind the camera. It's not, you know, every production that would bring in bouncy houses for the kids of the families who worked on the projects and have barbecues, you know, that's really says something special about that was special about the people who were involved in it and why they loved it as much as they did.
No, you're absolutely right. There was a friend of mine who loved the show. He loved it so much. And when I say a friend of mine, I'm not sure that I even really liked him. But I gave him my Stargate jacket because he loved the show so much. And I talked to Brad Wright one day, the producer, and I said, would you mind if this guy and I came by for a tour? And he let me bring him to the stages. And I walked him through all the sets. Because, you know, you're right. That was Brad, that was Jonathan, that was Robert Cooper. Yeah. They were all
very giving.
Super people. In fact, I was chatting with Brad a couple of days ago.
Yeah, they're the caliber of folks that made up this show. It was great, and I'm always amazed at how and thankful at how willing people are years later to come on and say, not everybody, but to come on, those who have to come on and say, let's talk about it again. It was a great period of my life. What do you remember most about looking back on your body of work with Stargate in particular? When you look back on all of those shots that you did.
You know, so for me, I was the supervisor for the first 2 seasons, basically. And so for me, the way the shows were structured, the way the MGM shows were structured is, you know, we were brought up. There were lots of people from out of town. So Bob Habros, who I just mentioned, who just texted me. In fact, we're staying at his house in Point Roberts. So we all really keep in touch. You know, we all came up from, you know, LA. I came from Toronto. People came from all over to work on these shows. And I think what the group of us remember, aside from the wonderful work, of course, was the time that we spent because we were all, I mean, how should I say? We were all single. We all had per diem. You'll notice when I start showing you some stuff, one of my directories is called parties. In fact, Richard Dean Anderson and I threw a Halloween party. There's a bar here in town called the Waldorf. It's not fancy like the Waldorf in perhaps New York, but in fact, it's not fancy like that at all. But it's a pretty good place. There's a bunch of bars in there. We rented all the bars and we threw a party for the crew.
Should we start off with show and tell? Should we begin with that, or how would you like to proceed?
Sure, like any structure is cool, and I'm a fan of taking questions. So what I've done, just so you guys know, is over the last couple of days, I've been digging through all my material in order to find stuff to show you. Now, some of it I can't get, as you may or may not know. I'm one of the visual effects supervisors on Superman and Lois.
Yes.
And with the writer's strike,
yes,
we're all sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah.
And the studio is locked off. So a lot of my material is actually at the studio. So I've gathered up what I could, which I think you're going to be really happy with.
Oh, I can't wait to see. You should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Push and share. Going to share the whole screen. One thing I have done, just so you know, as my background on my screen, I'm running just a slideshow from pictures from Stargate. Oh, actually, look at that.
Look at how young you are.
Oh, stop it. So here, let me actually just go right there. I'm going to open up some. Now, these are in no particular order.
Sure.
Which is the way it is. This is the model shop. So the way the show was structured is there were two visual effects teams. And there was myself and James Titchener.
Yes.
Who did most of the series. James started with me as a coordinator and a PA many years before. So James and I have worked together for years and years and years and years before Stargate. And then he inherited the show after I left, and he did a fantastic job. But we also, so there was there were the supervisors on the show. Then we had several vendors. So we used Rainmaker as one of the vendors.
Yep.
Northwest Imaging was another vendor. We used Image Engine sometimes, and of course they've gone on to do great things.
Oh man.
I gave them some of their very first work on The Outer Limits many years before.
Wow.
It was a morph shot. I still remember that. Mark Bernard was on the show. Mark's gone on to run a school called Lost Boys, where a lot of the best artists come from now. So a lot of tremendous people came out of the show. I had a company in Toronto, and I had a company which I opened for Stargate in Vancouver. The Toronto company, that's where I'm from. Like, I was basically in Toronto.
Okay.
I was working on a show. I did Tech War, which was the William Shatner series.
Absolutely.
And as that was winding down, the producing company, Atlantis, said, you know, we have this show in Vancouver that we think you'd like to do. And I moved to Vancouver. Well, I didn't move to Vancouver. For 10 years, I literally lived in Vancouver and Toronto. 2 sets of underwear, 2 sets of clothing, the whole thing. I could so that I could just get on a plane and not worry about forgetting stuff behind.
Of course.
It was not a bad life. It was kind of crazy. Anyway, we won't go there yet. So this picture is from my Toronto office, and my Toronto office had the latest digital tools. We were the first company who was investing in discrete logic, which wrote Flame software, which was very, very big at the time. One computer was $1 million.
Oh my gosh.
And that's what visual effects were in those days. So upstairs, we had the computers. We had the 3D section around the hall, and I probably have some pictures of that. Downstairs, I had a model shop, and we had a shooting stage. Movie cameras, lights, motion control. We were basically a full-on visual effects facility. These are some of the guys from the model shop. This is my brother, actually, down here.
Ah, okay.
And, who I saw a couple of days ago. I went back to Ottawa to see him. It's funny, you know, I'm just going to do stream of consciousness, and you tell me if I'm going too far.
So is this, did you guys make this glider full from scratch, or was this an asset from the film?
What glider? What glider?
The one in between you guys there.
No, I can't see it. Oh, you mean that? I'm fucking with you. So anyway, yes, we did. We built it from scratch. Now, we based it on the film.
Okay.
And what was super cool is one day I'm walking around at the studio, Bridge Studios. They have the original gate from the film. They had some of the original pyramid models in storage. It was really cool.
Wow.
So anyway, we built the glider. So the one thing we had to do was the glider in the film, the wings were basically out. And we decided, in order to make the shots cooler, and I can show you some of those in a minute.
Yeah.
We would give them folding wings like naval fighters do, so you could jam more of them into a given space. So we built the fighter with wings that were down, added all the detail, blah, 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 blah. You can see there's some little guys in there. And yeah, so Rick, my brother, built it. Dave Axford was the model shop lead. These two gentlemen, I hate to admit, I don't remember their names anymore. But Pete Edmonds here was the best pyro guy I've ever worked with.
Wow.
He could blow up anything. And trust me, we did. On all kinds of different productions. We worked together for many years. He also had a large gun collection, so occasionally we would have to go to the military bases and just put rounds through them. There's stories like that too, but maybe that's another channel. Or not another channel, another time. So there we go.
Wow.
Uh-oh. Okay. So this is one of the Goa'uld ships. You can't quite see it because it's white against white, but we needed to blow up one of the ships for one of the episodes, and we decided to build a large model. We would call them black box models, so we haven't painted it black yet. But it's so we have the CG object, we'd have the CG ship, but behind it is a physical model loaded with pyro. We line them up in 2D in the computers, and then when the ship needs to blow up, we sort of reveal the explosion in this black box model, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
So, and then for chuckles, obviously I wasn't around, otherwise we'd be working hard. But this is my brother and Dave, and that is Simon Lacey. Simon Lacey was one of the coordinators and supervisors on Stargate as well, early days. We went to York University together a long time ago, and he came on the show with us. And obviously they're not holding it up. It's being held up by a gigantic construction crane. But
jeez.
It looks fun.
Is it pathetic that I know exactly what shot this is from?
No, because I do too.
It's the climax to within the Serpent's Lair.
That's right. That's right. It was a shitty. Oh, look, I have my Stargate hat. For some reason, I don't know why. I always wear hats sideways. I can't help it. Also, when I shoot pictures, they're often crooked, and I bet they're related.
It's stylized.
Of course, I'll go with that. It was really a shitty day. It was raining a lot. So what does it say here? Jonathan, John, and Brad, and Michelle wish you were here. They were not.
Is it Michelle Commons?
What, sorry?
Is that Michelle Commons?
Of course.
Yeah.
Michelle Commons is doing spectacularly well in real estate.
Yes, I saw that. I would love to have her on the show if I could.
Oh, dude, she is so nice. And we were at her party last year. She throws it is remarkable how much we keep in touch. Now that I think it's the only show where we all keep in touch.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys had a great time and you made a lot of good memories.
Simon Lacey. So you'll notice, and I'm not sure how much your fans want us to talk about the filmmaking process.
Let's go.
Okay, so there's about 10 people on a movie that make creative decisions, right? There's a director, there's a writer, art, production designer, DP, visual effects. Everybody else moves heavy shit.
Yeah.
That's really what a movie crew is. And if you look at this stuff, it's all really heavy and it travels with us everywhere we go. This is just the visual effects department. The main unit was gigantic and it's its own thing. But, this is us. We were getting ready to shoot the ship blowing up. Funny story, stream of consciousness. You said tangents. Here we go.
Yep.
We rented this field to blow up because we needed to be outside of the city. This was in Toronto. Next door to us, they were shooting a movie. Oliver Stone was on a ship next door shooting a movie. They had so much light that we didn't have to use all of ours. It was just everywhere. But when we blew stuff up, it wrecked their takes. So we got one of their radios.
Yeah.
They got one of our radios.
Yep.
So when we were going to blow something up, we'd tell them,
Exactly.
and they'd all run to the side of the ship, and they'd watch. And then when they were shooting, we wouldn't do anything loud so that we wouldn't wreck their takes.
Yeah, good neighbors.
You got to be good neighbors with your filmmaking buddies. What else we got? There's, for some reason, we're starting with a Simon Lacey medley. So when we were at the Bridge Studios, there was a building, and it was the effects building. It was at the back of the lot, and that's where all the effects shows were. So this is basically Simon sitting at his desk in the effects building. It was really cool because Outer Limits was there,
Yeah.
Poltergeist was there, Stargate was there, Jeremiah. We were all in the same building. And that was a decision that was made by Hudson Hickman, who was the VP of physical production at MGM Studios. Hudson is a wonderful guy. We still keep in touch, although he doesn't live around here, so we don't see him so much. Yeah. He really set up a system, and he had, Bob Habros was in charge of all of the teams. But Hudson set up a system that really did a spectacularly good job of getting the most out of everybody without killing us. Because you guys know the movie business, the hours can be somewhat oppressive.
Yeah.
And it's not just because it's expected, because it's because you want to. And that's actually one of the hardest things to do. People need to realize that they have to take time off when we're working. I remember I was in Hong Kong working on, of all things, Beverly Hills, Chihuahua 2. And every morning that I'd come in, there'd be somebody sleeping on my couch.
Yeah.
And I swear they played paper, scissors, rock for the honor of sleeping on my couch so that I would come in and see how hard they were working. I would say, no, go home. I'm not going to get the best from you if you're staying here, like working till 2 a.m. and then you're up at 8 or 9 again. It's like, go home, get some rest.
It's easy to get lost in the work if you're having such a creative outpouring of energy on a project. It's easy to forget, oh yeah, I need to eat, or I need to go pee. Those things kind of fall by the wayside because you're involved in this thing.
It's true. It's true. On film sets, of course, food is provided.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, well, that's great, blah, 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 blah. But sometimes you just forget. Yep. So it's really handy to be able to go to set or something, grab something to eat, go back.
Yep.
And I have stories about that too.
What is
this? You
this?
might have noticed this tank.
Yeah.
So this is the tank that we shot the Kawoosh in. This isn't the Kawoosh shot. We're shooting some other smoke, but this is basically the water tank. And I don't know if you guys know how that works. Very briefly, it was like 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters. It was a gigantic tank. 1 cubic meter of water weighs a metric ton. This would have been about 3 or 4 tons. We had to reinforce the floor.
Oh my God.
We filmed. For some shots, the camera would have to be underneath, and like nobody, so there's a camera underneath, there's this gigantic water tank, then above is an air cannon.
Yep.
And the air cannon basically shoots air into the tank. And that, as the air pushes in, it displaces the water, which creates that cool shape. That's how we did it. You might have thought, oh, well, that was all done in CG. But in those days, the computers weren't powerful enough. We tried to do it, and we continued working on it, and I think they eventually got it. But at the beginning, we did it the same way they did it on the movie. Air cannon shooting water into a tank. Now, setting the air pressure is really critical, because if it's too little, it doesn't look cool. And if it's too big, well, what happens? And of course, your first take, it's always too big. We shot the air in, the water just lifted vertically out of the tank and landed all over the studio. So that wasn't a good, and in fact, had anybody been underneath the tank, they would have been the only person dry. But you always wondered if that kind of basically explosion in water would crack the tank and kill you. Uh-huh. So we didn't let anybody go under the tank when we were filming.
Yeah. So this is... Go ahead. Name. Let's see who's here in the shot.
So this is Dave Axford again, ran the model shop. That's Rick, my brother, who ran the model shop next.
Yeah.
And then this is John Camphans. So my company had three senior supervisors, myself, Tom Turnbull, and John Camphans. Tom and John mostly stayed in Toronto. And John Camphans, if you Google him, he did a lot of shows you would possibly recognize back then. And Tom Turnbull, I think he's working on Halo right now.
Wow.
So all of us have gone on to work on, really big stuff.
Wow.
There's the fighter again. So this is our movie camera. There's a green screen in the background, and the ship. In the ship, there was the art department designed this little sort of a, the cockpit would lift vertically up into the ship.
Yes. Yeah, this is the SG-1 season 1 finale.
That's right. That was quite a big episode.
Wow. That's wild.
And so this would be in our shooting stage back in Toronto. The movie camera is Mitchell 35mm high speed. I bought it about 15 years before from a gentleman who personally knew Charlie Chaplin. And we modified it to take Nikon lenses because they were very plentiful. In fact, if you look behind me, there's my collection of Nikon lenses, most of which we would have used on this movie camera.
Wow. Now, is it true, John, that you guys shot a lot of the more intimate stuff in terms of like with cast and crew with Super 16 cameras and a lot of the visual effects oriented stuff for 35? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, money isn't infinite on shows like this. So it was cheaper to shoot on 16. It was significantly cheaper on 16. And we were using Super 16, which of course gave us the widescreen aspect ratio. Strangely, I think most of the early Stargate episodes are aired 4:3 even today. But we shot them 16:9, and we did all the work 16:9. So that exists if you can find it. And then, and here's the thing, movie cameras with film, the film would, as a shutter advanced, the film would be pulled down and then a registration pin would engage the film and hold it steady, in place while the shutter was open. But if you imagine that 16mm film is half the size of 35.
Correct.
The amount of weave is essentially twice as much. So gate weave is what we would call that. The film would move a little bit between frames. So even in a locked off shot, the film would always be moving just a smidge. And so 35mm gave us better registration. And then 35mm cameras would often have more registration pins. Certainly a Mitchell, like the camera you're looking at now, that would hold the film much, much steadier, which made it easier for us to layer the visual effects into a shot.
Now, John, James Titchener said that in order to combine the smoothness between the transitions of the 35s and the 16s, you would actually have to add noise into the 35s. So
philosophically, when I do visual effects, and this is what Mr. Titchener's Mr. Titchener, can you believe I said that? This is what James is alluding to, Mr. Titchener. So we're not trying to make things look real.
Right.
We're trying to make things look photographically real. Our visual effects have to look like main unit shot it.
Yep.
Otherwise we failed. Otherwise they're going to stick out and you're going to go, that's not real, but I don't know why. Oh, well, because the grain doesn't match.
Yeah, it's too clean. It's
too clean.
You can reach out and ping it with a finger.
Yeah. And of course, now, like on shows like Superman, there's virtually no grain in the image at all because of the digital cameras. And sometimes we put it in if it helps mush everything in together. But maybe that's another episode. Yes, we're constantly trying to take our images and make them look like main unit shot them. So 16, Super 16, sometimes if they're shooting high speed or if they're shooting on a 400, in those days we called it ASA, these days it's ISO stock, there's a lot of grain in there. We've got to match the grain. Sometimes, depending on the lenses, the corners of the screen get a little soft. Sometimes there's vignetting, so we put that vignetting in the corners, we soften the edges. When we do CG, it's even cleaner than the 35mm. So when we're doing fully CG environments, you're adding grain. Now you have to add it. There's lots of tricks to adding grain, which we don't necessarily have to get into. But I love that shit in case anybody cares. But we add the grain, we diffuse the sides of the screen, we do all these things. There's some software called CG Montage, and you use that to put some chromatic aberration on the sides of the screen just to make sure that what we're delivering cuts in so it looks as bad, which I'm using sort of in a joking way, but it looks as bad. It looks, it completely matches the live action footage.
Okay. That's crazy. All right.
So what episode was this? There were 3 of these things on a hilltop.
Yes. So that is Thor's chariot.
Damn, you're good.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. You guys made your own, I don't know if they're a pyramid ship or if they're a pyramid base, but certainly I recognize that they were definitely a little different in appearance than the one in the feature film. And
they had these big gaps in it.
Yeah. And they also appear in Need when Daniel is going through his drug overdose. This is so cool, man. How much time would it take to build something like this?
Well, you have to do the math, right? You have to be really good at math. So we'll calculate what would it cost to build this on set. Of course, something like this, it's basically infinite, so we're not going to do that. Then we always look at the 2 solutions. Do we build it CG? Do we build it as a physical model? And here, back in those days, there was a rule of thumb that would always give me the right answer. If the camera had to move, then it's easier for us to build a CG object and track it because the tracking software was pretty good even then. Wow. So if there's a lot of camera move in a shot, we would lean towards building CG objects. If the camera did not move, then building a model and taking it outside in the parking lot and shooting it always looks better, but it's hard to track.
Okay.
So the math was often not financial. It was more, how are we going to approach the shot? How are we shooting it on set? How are we going to, comp it later? One interesting thing about this shot, because I remember the way we did it, we set it up in the parking lot. We waited, we basically wait for the kind of weather that we want, but we would shoot them on still cameras. In other words, if the model's just sitting there and I grab my Nikon and I set it up, and so when you're shooting, you have to match the way you shot on set. Again, we're making our stuff look like it was shot by the main unit. So we would know the distance to the hilltop, for instance. We would know the tilt of the camera. We would know the focal length that we shot on. Now, if we're shooting on a Nikon instead of a movie camera, it's about a 1.5 difference. So we would compensate with the focal lengths. And of course, the scale of the model would affect the distance that you shoot it from. But if you get all that stuff right, and it's really not very hard, well, it looks perfectly real, just drops right in. And there's no need to shoot it on a movie camera. Again, there's not an infinite amount of money. So if we can save a little money shooting with the still camera, especially in those days, because you couldn't, okay, this sounds ridiculous. Email didn't exist.
Yeah.
So we would send instructions to each other by fax. We would draw something. It's like, this is great. We can send a piece of paper across the world. So we would do a drawing and send it over. And they're like, no, it hasn't arrived yet. Oh, it's coming. But by shooting a single picture, it was often easier to bring back. Or so, and it was cheaper to FedEx because we would FedEx stuff all the time. It's so much easier to do this work now.
Wow.
But the model would have probably taken about 2 weeks for, this number of people. Some of them are better at building.
Yeah.
Some of them are better at painting. And then some of them are better at just making sure it gets done. Those are all very important skills. There was a saying. Wild. There's a saying that is, we don't need it good, we need it Tuesday.
Yeah.
So for us, it was all about optimizing, the crew, getting it done by Tuesday. Because if you don't, people get fired.
What? I'll hold my question to another shot, but I've got a question about that.
No, go ahead, please.
So how much do you know about? I don't know if there's a term for it. I kind of think of it as like a visual effects triad. You can have it good, cheap, or fast, and you can have any two of the three. If you want it good and you want it cheap, you're not going to have it fast. Is there any truth to that?
Oh, dude, absolutely. In fact, a couple of months ago, I think we sat there and said, now you only get to pick one.
Wow.
But no, that's really the key to almost any industrial process, especially a highly iterative, political, creative, big budget process. So if you imagine the good, fast, cheap triangle, and so you guys can see my screen, right?
Can you stop sharing for a moment, and then we'll be able to go back to you?
Okay, stop and share.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. All right. Go right
What
ahead.
I was going to do is actually draw on the screen the good, fast, cheap triangle.
Oh, okay. Well, then I apologize, John. Go back to that.
Go back to that. And
Yes,
I was
sir.
only going to do it because that picture had a lot of nice white, sort of empty screen space.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm moving the image over. Can you
Okay.
guys see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, grabbing my annoting tools. Good. Doesn't matter what side you put it on. Fast, cheap. We literally call it the good, fast, cheap triangle. And you can already see where this is going. If you want something good, which everybody does, you can have it fast or you can have it cheap, but you can't have both. So if you need it fast, it's gonna be expensive because we're gonna do lots of overtime. Everyone's gonna work really hard. We're gonna probably need pizzas in the middle of the night, all the stuff that it takes to keep people working. Now, if you want it good and you want it cheap, if you have lots of time, well, that works really well. There's no OT, saves a lot of money. You can have a smaller crew.
Yeah.
But part of the creative process, and I know your fans know this, I know you guys know this, is if you're working on something, sometimes you're working on it and you just put it away.
Yep.
You come back next week and because when you're in the grocery store, you're still thinking about work. You can't help it. So you're kind of making progress even while you're out doing human normal things. So if you want good and cheap and you have time, that's actually the best.
Okay.
Now, if you need something fast, which often is the case, like on Superman and Lois,
Yep.
we had it pretty quick. It was a television series. It wasn't a television streaming show. They wanted it fast. They wanted it good. So it's not going to be cheap, right? Again, because we're doing lots of overtime, we're going to break stuff up over lots of different vendors to get the work done, right?
Yep.
In parallel. But when you do that, mistakes happen. You know, these guys make something, these guys, oh, it doesn't work. Got to work the weekend to, fix this. The good, fast, cheap triangle is the key to visual effects. And if you want it cheap, you can either have it good or you can have it fast, but you can't have both. So you either need a lot of money or you need to have fairly low expectations. And I've worked on shows of both types.
Yeah, that's crazy. You have to find what the customer wants and make it work. So.
Well, you do. And there's a couple of ways that you do that. Like I'm a fan of budgeting. I actually really enjoy the process of budgeting. And, this is kind of for another conversation. But when you're doing your budgets, you're thinking through the process. So as you're doing that, you're sort of putting, oh, well, I'm going to get Dave to do this. And Andrew's going to do that. And Anne's going to comp it. And this is how much time I think they're going to spend. So, as you're doing the work, as you're doing the budgets, you're sort of planning out the whole process. And that's really when you go to the producers to present your budget. And I just presented a budget yesterday for an Apple show. One of the things that comes up is I'll say to them, for every person in the approval chain, add about 5% to the budget.
Wow.
And usually the room goes silent. Okay, so this is for you people who want to work in the movie business, this is a really good trick. When the room goes silent, when you drop a bomb like that, the next person who talks loses. So you just say, for every person in the approval chain, add 5%. And then if you're an asshole, you do this. If you're a bigger asshole, you do that. And you wait. And somebody's going to say, yeah, okay, I see that, and then they decide, so-and-so's in charge. And I'll tell you, on some shows, there's 7, 8, 9 people who you have to get feedback from. And often for lower level executives, as they're working their way up the food chain, they're given positions where they're not really allowed to say yes. They're only allowed to say no, because they can't approve something because this person up here has to approve it.
Right.
But so you go to them and they'll go, oh, I don't really like the pyramid. I think it should have more weathering in it. So you weather it, and then they give you some other note, and then it goes up the food chain. And usually they go, this is great. But sometimes they'll say, well, why is there so much weathering? And you can't rat out the other person.
Right. No, it's all political.
You
have to work with these people in the future. So.
Well, you do, even if you don't like them. And on Stargate, we were lucky because we liked everybody except for one person. But, and I can't tell you who that is. So, so then you'd have to say, well, I kind of thought it would be a good idea, but obviously I went too far. You know what? It's super easy for us to pull it back, and we can have that for you tomorrow.
Wow.
So a lot of it is just making people feel good about, the decisions they're making and the process. Because in visual effects, and again, we're still sitting here staring at a model, which suspiciously, what I should have done now that I think about it, this is going to be almost funny. We could have gone good, fast, cheap, and used the pyramid itself. There you go. This is worth.
That's funny, John. Oh, that's funny.
That's actually funny.
You did make a pyramid above a pyramid. That was pretty funny.
That's right. That's I'm sure some of the fans noticed that earlier. It's like, come on, do it.
Oh, that's
anyway,
good.
We could talk about this all day, but then we're never going to get anywhere.
All right. What else have you got for us?
I got nothing. I'm joking. Okay, what do we got? Okay, so this is a computer-controlled camera. It's called a motion control system. I went to York University, so did Simon. Basically, often when you're filming, and I don't know if Titchener talked about this, but shooting a camera move in those days, it was hard to reproduce it later.
Yes.
Especially if it's going to be a model. So this camera, this is a very simple one. The camera is here, of course, on this is a Whirl head, which we motorized with stepper motors. This is the computer and the drivers for the motors. We had these remote wheels. You could drive the camera up and down the track. You can pan and tilt it. We had other ones with, crane arms and stuff like that. We save the move, and then we go back to our model stage. And if the model is, let's say, 1/4 scale, you can scale all the linear dimensions by 0.25. All the rotations remain the same. And when you play the move, it will scale with the model.
So this allows you to match layers of plates together into one shot.
Now, these days you do it all digitally. It's better, it's faster, it's cheaper. You literally get all three sides of the good, fast, cheap triangle, which is unusual. But in those days, that's what we had to do. Now, sometimes motion controls, they were a little tricky. So Simon and I would work out with the first AD, the first assistant director, that if we said, because after we'd shoot a take, we would check the rig. If we said the take was good, then the take was good. If we said the take was perfect, it means we have a problem. Oh. And the first AD has to find us a few minutes to figure out what's going on. So that's just one of those little filmmaking tricks.
So you wouldn't want perfect.
No, but you also wouldn't want to say you have a problem.
Yeah.
In the movie business, and we're talking mostly about the movie business, not about the show, but we'll get back to the show. In the movie business, there's only two right answers. Yes, and yes, but.
Yep.
So if somebody says, can we do something?
Yep.
Of course we can do it. But it's going to be expensive. It's good, or it's good, blah, 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 blah. You can always say that, but you always open with yes.
Well, yeah, you guys are problem solvers,
We are. That's me with my Stargate hat. This is my Mitchell camera, which would do up to 120 frames a second. This camera would shoot 500 frames per second.
Oh my gosh. So make things really, really big.
Oh, you should hear it. It was unbelievable. We were shooting, I think, the Reetous.
Yes.
Which we're going to get to in a second, because this is really cool. Bonk. Oh, okay, so there you go. There's the ship with our pal Oliver Stone. And here's the Goa'uld Ship, suspended from a construction crane.
Wow.
We're just in the middle of a field. probably, oh, look, this is probably oil. It'll probably explode and we'll all die. Didn't think about that. So, here's the film crew. There's all the gear that you saw. I mean, really, this is the whole crew that it takes to shoot a model like this.
John, how big is that model? It's
Around
like
20
8
feet.
Oh, man. 20 feet?
Maybe 15. Okay, here's how big the model is. It had to fit into a 5-ton truck.
Wow.
So whatever the diagonal is through a 5-ton truck, that's how big the model is.
Wow. That is so cool, John.
Thank
you for
these are
sharing
small
these.
in frame. I can make these bigger for you guys. Sorry.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
go. Yeah. This stuff is fun. Granted, you're getting rained on and it's the middle of the night and all of that stuff, but it's way better than almost anything else that you can do for a living. This is a really good career, but I'll tell you, you have to have a stomach for it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel stressed very much.
Yeah.
But people who do, it kills them.
Well, I mean, you're making, especially at this stage in time, late 90s, I imagine you're making so much of this up from scratch. And it's just can we put these things together and make it work? And when it works, it's got to be like, oh, man, this is awesome. Cool. And when it's not, it's like, okay, we tried that. Let's try something else.
Correct. And the deadline's approaching.
Yeah. Oh, John, look at this. Is this Children of the Gods set?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I've got a funny story about that. Okay, so the temples that they had?
Yeah.
There were these temples out in a couple of shots. We'd look out and they were Greek-style temples. And they had these figures on the edges, right? So we hired this matte painter. And we say, okay, we're doing these temples. They're kind of like Greek temples. And he's a really good matte painter. So he paints the temples, but the little people aren't on them. He said, hey, and I'm not going to use the name, where are my people? Oh, well, Greek temples don't have people like that. I said, well, yes, but they're Greek-like temples. Yeah. And we would like the people on them. Okay, sure. Next week, I get what looks like a final, and the people aren't there. The little sculptures aren't on the tops of the temples. Say, well, this is really good. I really like, because you always open with something positive, right? Yep. This is really good. Good job. Oh, you're so big and strong. But where are my people on my temples? Said, well, I thought about it a lot, and Greek temples don't. Said, we're in outer space. We're not in Greece. These aren't Greek temples. I really need Brad Wright and Jonathan. They really want, and he just wouldn't do it because Greek temples wouldn't have it. So creative people, and I'm one of them, can drive you bananas. But anyway, here's a shot. This is more of the crew. And so we've got the gate, we've got the dial. Oh, there's your dial device.
Yeah.
There's your show. I don't have a lot of behind the scenes pictures on Stargate because cameras really weren't permitted.
Oh, wow.
So that's really one of the things. Well, on all shows. On Superman, I have a ton of behind the scenes pictures because people thought I was the set photographer. Because as a visual effects person on set, you don't actually do anything.
Yeah.
So you end up like, who is that guy? Oh, he's the set photographer. So I just saw him. But on Stargate, they all knew who I was. So this gate basically traveled in a truck. Yep. And they'd show up the day before and they'd put it together. So you'd have the gate and you'd have the pieces. It's all basically styrofoam that's been and fiberglass that's been painted. We wanted the gate to spin, of course, on location, but we just couldn't make that happen.
I sold the location gate to the Sci-Fi Museum in Seattle in the first Propworks auction in 2010, September 2010. It went for $75,000.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
I assure you, they paid more than that.
All right.
I'm not sure what this is, and I don't recognize it. But we needed a snow field. We need some snow, so we had a matte painting of some object, and this is how we created the snow for it.
Oh wow! Very cool.
There's the ship exploding. Terrible photograph. I've got a better one. This is cool. So remember when we saw the ships in space? Look at how big. Oh, we'll come back to that. Okay, I'll go back. I thought I had a better picture. That model is enormous.
Yeah, because you had to zoom in to SG-1 on the bridge.
We had to zoom in onto the bridge. What? Okay, so I remember shooting that. and I had a horrible cold, and
Oh
I'm almost
no.
dying, and we're trying to shoot this plate. And what we were discussing is, should the camera start moving slowly and continue slowly through the whole move, or should it move out quickly and then slow down and come to a stop, which is easier for us digitally? And that went back and forth for a while. We probably shot it both ways. And then Jonathan just said, "You are so sick, just go home."
Ah. Yeah,
But
when your executive producer comes to you and says, "Hey, dude,
Yeah.
you gotta take a breath."
But they
Wow.
didn't say that while I was shooting the most important plate of the season. It's like, no, you stay here and die.
Yeah.
And then if you live, you can go home. But yeah, the model is gorgeous. This does not show it to its best, but I think I've got a better picture. Here's the fighter again after after the battle damage.
Wow, look at that detail. Can you zoom in a little bit?
I can, of course.
Look at that detail. That is so cool.
This used to hang above my desk in my office for years.
I can understand why. What's the wingspan?
It was about 4 feet.
Wow.
It was big. This was a really big model. It photographed really nicely. Now you'll notice it's on a green screen.
Yep.
Because the model's blue.
You don't want pieces of it to disappear.
If the model is green, you know what color the screen would be.
Yep.
So this was one of Titchener's episodes.
Yes, it was. This is A Matter of Time. And this
you
is...
can tell just from the blue screens.
Yes, this is the gravity of
That's
the
right.
Star pulling the guys toward the gate. Now, he said that if you watch the episode, there's a couple of different ways that they did this. They actually had a background element in some, so it was like a projection, and some of the set photography was done with that one. And one of the things that James admitted to was a lot of these shots, or a handful of them in this episode, he's not happy with. And others he is, and I guess that's probably the case with, your work as you go back. That's better than that. That's not so good. We tried that. I'm glad we tried that because we never did that again.
Yeah.
That's wild. Look at that.
There's a rule we have with the artists, and that's no shot can be great until every shot is good.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And where I'm going with that is sometimes you're working with somebody and they're glomming onto a shot, and in their heads, they're like, oh, this is going to look good on my demo reel.
Yep.
So they keep working that shot at the expense of the other ones that aren't there yet.
Yep.
So there's, when we approve shots, we have one of the levels of approval. One of the status levels is CBB, which means could be better.
Yep.
So as soon as a shot is getting close to being good, we CBB it, and then you move on to something else. And if time allows, you come back to it later.
Right.
So this is one of the Reetous.
Wow.
So and this is after it exploded.
Yep.
So we basically built these things as models, and we blew them up at 500 frames a second.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why. And it's a really interesting story, because one of my friends, one of the guys that I work with on Superman, Chris Dager, he loves Stargate.
Aww.
And he loves Amanda tapping, right?
Aww.
He thinks
don't we
great.
all?
So I was working on a show with Amanda, and Amanda comes in, and we're sitting there, and Chris Dager is sitting there, and we're talking about the shots, and we're looking at the shots. And Chris Dager, who is like the nicest, most trucker, like absolutely inhibition-free guy, who will say anything that crosses his mind, couldn't find the nerve to say hello to Amanda tapping.
Yep. Amanda, she's so disarming. Yeah, absolutely.
I flew into Vancouver one after New Year's, right? Because we would all go home and we all flew back. And the airport was packed. I'm thinking, how am I going to get home? I'm never going to get a taxi. And Amanda Tapping walks up. Hey, John, what are you doing? Good to see you, blah, blah, blah. How are you getting into town? I said, well, I don't know. I guess I'm going to get a taxi. She says, well, why don't you come in the limo with me? And then as we're walking, we see more crew members, and we all gathered into her limo. So she is a super person.
Yeah.
Absolutely super person.
She deserves every success she's earned. Directing now, really she's great.
Yeah, super, super, super nice. So the Reetous, we could not afford to keep them on the screen all the time, because in the original script, these guys were running around and you can see them. And I suggested, oh yeah, you see it now. I suggested to Brad, hey, why don't we have some kind of device where they can see them? Otherwise, we don't have to do them. And that's why
go ahead.
That's why. Yeah.
That's why they're invisible.
That's why they're invisible. We couldn't afford to do them in all the shots. It turned out being cooler.
Yeah.
Because again, good, fast, cheap triangle. We could not do that many shots good in the time that we had. The solution was to make them invisible.
And it's a great sci-fi idea. You know,
Oh,
you
yeah.
have enemies that are exactly 180 degrees out of phase of your reality, but they're still here. They can still interact with the world, but we can't perceive them. That's cool, John. I didn't know you did that.
So you probably recognize this.
Sulfur pits.
Yeah. Those are piles of sulfur. And they're sitting on the dock across Cole Harbor. And they get shipped out all over the world. And somebody said, well, why don't we film there? That's a great idea. Look how cool it is. Except, might have been the hottest day of the year. Of course, nothing compared to these days. So the sulfur, as you walked, would land on your face. And then your sweat would drag it into your eyes. And then you would go to the ambulance because no one expected it to be that hot. And it was just one of those things. As soon as there was a problem, they brought, everything that we needed. They brought us tons of water. We were, wiping our face, and we got, goggles and everything. But we just didn't anticipate how hot it was going to be.
That's crazy. Day. Now, this is the facility. This isn't the one that's downtown by the water. This is the one that's out in the middle of nowhere, the big plant, right?
No. This is downtown by the water. If I turned around, you would just see the other side of Vancouver.
So you did shoot the whole thing downtown?
We did shoot the whole thing downtown.
Wow. I was always under the misconception that it was the big facility outside of town. I forget what it's called, where the bigger piles are. So that's really cool.
So here's one of the gates.
Yes.
I think that's from the movie.
The chevrons are red.
Yeah.
It's yours.
Well, there you go. Wow. I'm just going to pick up the pace a little because we're kind of done. This is a moon, but I got tons of stuff.
Yeah.
This is the moonscape. And remember, the camera pulled out and pulled out and pulled out and pulled out.
Message in a bottle.
That's right.
Awesome.
Was that the one that had the bomb inside of? There was a little girl and there was a bomb inside of her.
That's Singularity. That's season 1.
Yes,
this is Message in a Bottle season 2. O'Neill got taken over by the blue organism. So.
Yeah. Oh, there's me after that.
Hello, John.
The cool thing. Oh, there you go.
This is
She's
so
a little
cool.
Stargate.
Can I ask a question about this?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So how many of these Kawooshes did you end up archiving for the long haul with this?
Oh, what? Are you going to check my answer against Titchener's? That's what you're doing, right?
Nope. I didn't ask him this question.
You know what we did? To save money, we spiked the floor in 4 places in the gate room. And we would, so long as we always put the camera back in one of those places, we had elements ready to go.
Okay.
So in the time that I was there, which was only 2 years, we had 4 positions in the gate room. And when we would go on location, we would have to simulate those. We would have to, reverse engineer the camera positions so that the elements would work.
Okay. So you essentially had 4 principal shots of the Kawoosh. Okay.
Yes.
Wow. That is so cool.
One of the, there we go. There's the crew that did the Reetou explosions. We had to put plastic everywhere because we literally, the model shop couldn't build this inside, so we actually used real meat. So for weeks we had raccoons going up and down in the alley at night going, this is great.
I'm sure they were in love with you guys.
Oh, they were like, this is going to last forever. Of course, eventually they got it all. But
what kind of meat do you recall? Just any kind that you could grab?
Whatever was cheap, but because cheap meat is better. It's sinewy and it's got crap in it.
Yeah.
It's like I said, fun thing to do for a living. I don't remember where we used this, but we needed to fly over a cloudscape.
Yep.
So we built, this is all the stuffing from pillows.
Wow. This could
So a
have
giant.
been The Other Side in season 4. Or were you still there at that point?
No, I
Oh,
wasn't.
okay.
It could be something we ended up not using.
Okay. It's really cool.
Never know.
Stuffing from pillows.
It was stuffing from pillows.
Ah, the fifth race.
There you go.
How
Yep.
wonderful.
Yep. It's when we were in the gate room, which of course isn't this image, but
Yeah.
oh, you know what? I remember being on set this day because I brought one of our new compositors who had just left another company to come and work on the show. And she and I were sitting at the back, and she's like, "This is crazy. You guys do this for a living." But anyway, in the gate room, you know how, there's the ramp that goes up to the gate, and the gate is there, and then there's this back wall.
Yes.
Did you know the back wall slid out of the way?
Yes, because that was the end of the stage.
Because the green screen was there.
Yep. Yeah.
When we ordered that green screen, they laid out the nap of the fabric because it was huge, back and forth. So it looked like a baseball diamond after someone cut the grass. And we looked at this and said, we can't use this. So we had to send it back to them. They had to cut it all up and re-sew it, flipping every alternate strip so the nap matched, so the lighting was the same.
Yeah, there's a one shot in season 3,
There you
episode
go.
1, Into the Fire, and they pull the back away to show Hathor's big generator, and it's just
That's right.
It's the same thing. So, there's is that the pyramid
There's
from the
original
movie?
Yeah,
It looks like it's floating.
it sort of does, doesn't it?
It looks like it's skating through the lot, and it's like midair.
Going to hit somebody's car. This is the Bridge Studios. We're looking
Yes.
north. These are the Stargate offices up here.
Yep.
And my office would be about, a couple hundred meters to the right in that building.
Wow.
I skateboarded back and forth, and I would skateboard around the lot. And I remember some of the grips brought skateboards, and they were told to stop skateboarding at work. And I said, but he skateboards. They go, no, he uses it to get from his office back and forth. So that's me.
Funny.
And that's Bob Habros.
Okay.
And look at those laptops. They're like 3 inches thick.
Wow.
This might have been the Outer Limits.
And you can only look at them dead on. You can't look at them from an angle.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
There's me again. Kennedy was our lead motion control guy, and Simon Lacey. Look at that shirt.
Yes,
Authentic.
and the Goa'uld communication ball.
Absolutely. It was an element, and here we are shooting it.
Can you explain the color palette for me?
Yeah, so this is called a Macbeth chip chart, and these are known colors all over the world. People use a color palette, this chart, everywhere. So when you're shooting an object, you shoot one with this chip chart in it so that the artists who have digital versions of them on their machines can match the colors to know that it looks exactly right.
Wow.
But you have to watch out because colors fade in light. So you have to keep your chip chart in the dark. You pull it out just for the use and you put it away. If you leave it out, the colors will fade, and then gradually you're giving bad information to the artists.
Yep. That's cool.
This is Ted Ray. The only known picture. I think he worked on us with Ted on the pilot.
You caught him in the wild.
I did. Well, this is my office. This is my Toronto office. And these are those $1 million computers.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, here's that model I was showing you with the motion control, so you can see.
Final shot of the show. So so this is just one facade of the ship, and you blended it in with the
Correct.
with the other model as the two of them are approaching Earth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that. Look at the detail on it.
The detail. Well, you said yourself we needed to push right in.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, I actually built some of these units, and what we did is I built these guys. Like, I'm actually a really good model maker, and if you could see, I got some models that I still actually make models sometimes.
Okay.
But I made some of the detailed panels and these things, and then the model shop cast them up and reproduced them.
Boy, oh boy.
This one's good. That's actually a pretty good
Yeah.
So we built it, and this is the correct angle.
Yep.
You can see the camera is just right here. So we're way up in the air, but that's what we needed. This is for the pullback shot. This is for us. It was at the right angle. The camera's way up in the air, and we would pull back across the whole length of the soundstage.
So you're not, you don't have any kind of green or blue screen around these edges. Is it just because it's a triangle, you can just cut it out?
Yep.
Okay.
You can roto a shape. It's just a triangle. It would take 2 seconds.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes people put green screen places, and I'm like, you don't need to do that.
Yep.
But no. But if you feel good, let's put green screen everywhere. Here's the gate.
You can always tell what time of the year it is in Vancouver. It's earlier in the season. Everything's kind of dead.
That's right. Oh, okay. So funny story. First couple of Stargate episodes, we were shooting in the woods.
Yep.
Right. So Hudson Hickman sends an email. Now, Hudson, remember, was the VP of physical production for MGM. And he was telling me, because, we just talk about shit. And we were just talking about management. And Hudson was talking about emails. And how people misinterpret emails. So Hudson sends an email up to Vancouver. I guess I was wrong earlier. There were emails when we did Stargate. There weren't when we did The Outer Limits. So Hudson sends an email up, and he says, hey, can we not go to the rainforest planet anymore? Fair enough. But everybody read it. Hey, can we not go to the rainforest planet anymore, you assholes?
Oh, yeah.
And he said, you have to watch out when you send an email, because people always put the words, you asshole, at the end of it. And if you read an email that way, you now know what you have to go back and change.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the most important things, is that kind of communication, because sometimes you're tempted just to bang something off and send it.
Yeah. Yeah. We often interpret the worst,
Absolutely,
because it's our voice in our heads. It's not what they necessarily intend. I think emoticons have helped this a lot. They've helped kind of grease those skids. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I've seen this shot before. This is so cool, John. And you can see that's where the camera is. That's just as the ship has been destroyed.
That's right. When it's in orbit around the Earth.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you something else, and then you can tell me how much time we have, because this is really cool. I found, it's on the wrong screen. What are you guys going to do? I'm joking.
What we can with what we got. Oh, look at that.
So I found this morning.
Wow. Oh, look at that.
Isn't this cool? That's a nice shot.
I loved that shot.
Yeah.
Oh, yep. That was so cool.
We did this shot the day we pulled an all-nighter on that, the night that it was due, because it wasn't working.
The helmet?
Yeah, me and Matthew Talbot Kelly, we stayed up all night. We cut it up, and we did the shot.
Wow, look at that.
Oh, I guess they're repeating.
I'm fine to look at it again.
Here it comes. Oh, this was a good one.
Yeah, Cold Lazarus.
Yep.
That's one of my favorite puddles right there.
That was a good one, yeah. Oh, there's
the Reetou.
Oh, we killed through the window.
Yeah. Outer Limits, I thought that was one.
Yeah. I think you're right, yeah.
Reetou. Cool. I didn't know that was you actually used meat for that, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, replacement face. That was Dan Shea did that shot, and then you guys put Jack's face on it.
I've got a funny picture of Dan Shea. I was out with my daughter last month. We were at a restaurant, and I'm taking a picture of my daughter, and I look up, and Dan Shea is photobombing us because he was at the same restaurant.
That morph with Charlie, I think, is one of the single coolest shots from the show. I don't know how you did it, but it is
Oh,
so
I'll tell
cool.
you how I did it because it hurt. We didn't. So if you look at it, we're looking at Richard this way,
Yep.
and then we're looking at Richard that way. So you're looking 180 degrees.
Yep.
You can't put this much green screen up, not realistically in a location on this shoot day. So what I had to do, and what Richard had to do, is he's in the set. He's like screwed to the floor almost,
Yep.
so he doesn't move. As he moves, he's moving forward. This is all motion control. Remember the computer controlled camera?
Yep.
That's the key to making this work. We're on Richard. We move. We're probably looking at him like this, and we counter. So we're looking at Richard. The camera starts moving towards him as it pans. Where did it go? Camera pans away. So first we shoot him on this side, and there's a stand-in here, probably Dan Shea.
Yeah.
Then we take Dan Shea out. We put Richard in. We shoot it again. Because the camera is computer controlled, the move is exactly the same. Then we shoot the boy with Richard on this side. We have a switcher on set, and we just shoot take after take. Move your hand up. Oh, that didn't work. Move your hand down. So you're right. This is hard. And the way you do it is you just brute force your way through it. You tell everybody, I'm going to need an hour. That's what it's going to be. And they're like, no, and you just shoot versions until you get it.
Yeah, because you can match it in camera as you go. Because if you look at the hand, it's seamless. And it literally, now that you say that, it's like, I bet they did 50 takes of the hand to make sure that they got that right. I'm imagining you're watching that in real time, blending it on one of the screens. It's blending as you go, right?
Yes, you can see it right around here, just a frame or two before. Yeah, that's Richard and a little bit of the boy. And that's the boy with a little bit of Richard.
So that's Kyle Graham, the kid. I hope you had a lot of patience for him, and he had a lot for you in getting that hand right.
I bet you 100%. I bet you we shot Kyle's take first.
Yeah. Okay.
Because Richard Dean Anderson is a pro,
yeah.
and he would get it in 10 takes, where the kid may never get it.
Right.
So a lot of it is, it's funny because people, ask me what I do for a living. I don't tell people what to do. I tell people what order to do it in.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference in the world.
Well, if you don't get this right, if it looks good on camera and then you guys walk away, you
don't go back.
You can't go back.
No, you don't go back. You've got to make it work. So here's something that's kind of fun. There's the ship.
Yep.
Do you know what we're doing here?
I'm guessing it's steel wool.
You are the winner. You're right. So because the camera was computer controlled, we shoot the hero pass first, then we send it back to the beginning, we turn out all the lights, and we put steel wool on it.
It's beautiful.
And that's Dave Asling, who built a lot of models for The Mandalorian.
Okay.
And we put the steel wool on. We shoot a few passes in there. You can see it on the ship.
Yeah, they did the same thing to the Enterprise in Search for Spock.
They sure did. And Wrath of Khan.
That's right.
So I remember delivering this shot to Brad. And he's like, can we have a few more pieces of debris? So we went back and we built these pieces. Now you can see the interlace because we shot at 24 and video in those days was 30. We built a few asteroids that we then animated flying past.
That is so cool. That shot, go back to that the shot with all the debris.
Yep.
It's probably a 4-5 second shot in the final show.
With the huge explosion back there and everything.
How much time is in that shot?
Oh,
how much manpower time?
Well, Barb Benoit was the lead compositor on this, so woman power. A shot like this, there's the couple of weeks building the models. There's a couple of days shooting them for sure for a small crew, doing temps and things. Barb probably worked on this for about 5 days.
My gosh.
So that would be like 5 days straight, 40, 60, 70 hours.
Yeah.
Now, this is a bigger shot. Now, if we were doing it today, the camera would move and
Yep.
probably follow it and do all that stuff. But this is sort of the limit of what we could do for TV. We always would have to, in our heads, scale the expectations to what can we do really well.
Yeah.
And not overreach. Like, so here.
Oh, this was,
if
when
you
I saw
look at
this in the show, I couldn't believe you guys had pulled it off. You made it look so convincingly like the movie. I was so pleased.
Okay, so look at it again, and I don't know if you can see it clearly.
Yeah.
Every piece is a flat panel.
Yeah.
In other words, we took the mask, and which you can't see here, I'm sorry, and we cut it out into about 20 pieces.
Wow.
And we moved each one at a time.
And you just subtracted them away.
And then subtracted them away. We tried building a 3D model. We tried all kinds of stuff, and the deadline is coming. And, Brad and Jonathan, to their credit, and of course, Robert Cooper later, they're not panicking. It's like, okay, do it. You're going to be fine. We know you're going to deliver. But that one was definitely an all-nighter.
It doesn't have to be the coolest tech that there is at the time with the most money, as long as you can sell the shot. And I, as an audience member, am going like, they took an effect that was done just a few years ago in the feature film and did it on screen. Because, okay, I've got to say, so the episode Thor's Chariot had aired a few weeks before. And they had to cheat. They cut to Daniel, and you hear the sound effect, and then you cut back to Harrower, and it's like, well, that was disappointing. And then when Secrets comes along, we get to see it. And it was like, okay, that's cool.
We had a mask that mechanically did it. But it only did one or two things.
Yes, for Apophis and for Teal. Yeah.
Correct. And so that's what we would have seen earlier. But we're like, no. We can do this. I'm sure we can do this. Can we do this?
Yeah, because those are for the serpent heads, but this is for the Horus-Guard. These are the ones in the movie.
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
So cool. John, thank you for sharing this. This is magic.
Well, I got to tell you, I have a ton of stuff here under Previs that I bet you'd love to see for Atlantis.
Wow. Okay, let's take a peek at Atlantis.
Okay, let me see what, okay. So Atlantis, I have more stuff. I've got a lot of pictures, but I can't find them. I know that they're in, so this stuff I was just organizing this morning.
Look, if you, I would love to have you back this fall, if you're willing to share some more, if that's cool with you.
I'm pretty good.
Okay,
like,
whatever.
The writer's strike,
right?
The writer's strike guarantees that I'm available.
Yeah. So whatever you want to share now that you have now, I'm appreciative. So,
well, there's a funny one, and let me see. This is, unfortunately, I've just got the shot names. So this was the pilot.
Yep.
We prevised all the action, of course. But the other thing that we did, and this isn't sort of set up to open quickly, so I'm just going to have to stumble through them.
You're fine.
Then I did stuff like this, because there was going to be a helicopter filming our helicopter. Now, I've flown in helicopters more times than I can count. I've thrown up in dozens of them. But I needed to have something that I could show the pilot. So this circle surrounds the camera helicopter, which is there, and it shows the pilot. I need you to film this.
So he knows how to behave with the cyclic. Yeah.
Otherwise, you just go up and you shoot stuff, and it never looks the way you see it in your head.
Yep.
So what we did here was actually really successful. So here's a shot. We previs that. And I know somewhere in here, I have the final for that. I was hoping these would turn into drone escapes, maybe. Is this the final shot? Nope. That's when it goes shooting around the room.
Yeah, it leaves the lab.
Yep.
Martin Wood and you guys just did.
Oh, there you go.
Stellar.
So there's the plate. You can't really see it. You know how we got stuck? Well, for one, we couldn't afford to paint out all the ski lines on the hill. We talked about it a lot. It's like, God damn it.
I didn't
But
notice.
nobody noticed. I
No.
know.
They're
And the
paying
other thing
attention to
is
the action.
yes, when the drone hits the ground, it explodes. And we had all the debris coming towards us, but it was white on white. You can barely see it. We never ended up going bigger.
Well, it
There's
works.
always,
It does the
it's
job.
kind of like what James was saying. There's always regret,
Yeah.
because the shot could be better. This is the final shot from Atlantis. So we designed the city when this is where we started. Matthew Talbot, Kelly, and I. So the art department on Atlantis basically designed the city as a stand-in, and it looked like a dinner plate with forks. And like that's as far as they went because they had to build all the sets. They knew I was coming. They knew they were going to be fine. So Matthew Talbot, Kelly, and I spent, and it must have been weeks where we designed this city, and it was fun. If you look at the pieces, and I'm just going to go back, when I was a kid, I used to build models, as I said, and models would come on sprue, and we would basically, I would build these cities. Like I probably built this as a kid, where I would take the sprue and cut them off at weird angles and glue pieces on them. And then I got Atlantis, and it's like, I get to do this for real.
A whole Manhattan-sized version.
That's right. And we decided that, you can't quite see it here, but you know the shape. It's the 6 things. So I don't remember what we called them, but each one was the same shape. And then we were thinking, well, there's this sort of, here's one of these buildings and this is a neighborhood.
Oh, you're
and,
talking each pier, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We called them piers. Each pier had its own detail. And then we built one of the piers as a gigantic metal object that we could sink in water, and we lifted it up with construction cranes. And that's how we got the water to flow off them.
Wow. If you have any of those elements.
I'm looking.
That sequence of the rising.
I've got the previs for this. I've got the previs for this.
Wow.
So these shots, okay, so when we were shooting on the planet, on the Wraith planet.
Yep.
It's really funny, you just say something and then everybody suffers. I said, it would be really cool if it was always windy. And then somebody goes, yeah. So then they bring out all these fans. And so the Wraith planet was windy because it was neat, but it's just because I said something in a meeting that somebody else liked.
Yeah, I just read, I have to tell you, you may have heard this. I just read Peter Jackson's biography, and he would go into the visual effects people and said, it would be really great if such and such and so forth. You don't have to do it.
That's right.
And he'd be like,
you don't have to do it.
Really, Peter? We don't have to do it? Of course we're going to do it. He's given them a challenge. Oh, look at that. Yeah, the jumper bay.
The jumper bay. This is the previs. And then we went and shot the plates to match.
How cool.
So,
scientific.
Okay. I knew you'd like that. We previs the entire show of Atlantis with Fisher-Price figures.
That's great.
I bet you didn't know that.
No, I did not.
I can't show you some of the weird stuff. Not weird that way, just it's, if it came to harm, because I don't want that getting out.
Yeah.
But no, this was really cool. This was a fun show because there was a lot of design work and a lot of creativity that we we had. And I really appreciate that the material so well.
Oh, this is one of the greatest franchises of all time.
It really is.
This is
Let's
so
see what
cool.
else we have in here.
Wow.
There they go.
Yeah. Spaceships. I love it.
I know. They were cool. And of course, we had to build these things to fit on a truck.
Yeah.
So we could take them around.
Yeah.
So the scales were always a little compromised.
The interior one that was on set, I think it was, if my memory serves, was a larger interior than the one that was sliced down the middle, bisected, and put on location. Oh, Ingram, look at this. It's not even Rodney yet.
Yeah.
This is pre-McKay.
Yeah. No, you're right about the inside. It was like a Japanese car. You know, they were bigger inside than outside.
Wow. Tori looks pretty good for a Lego.
I think they had a good life, and then there it appears.
Doctor, this is why you brought me here. That's so cool, man.
Yep, we really worked on those shows. We worked really hard.
And there's the font. Yep, with the
this might go
color
longer.
and.
Oh, this is the space battle.
Yep.
You know, the space battle is really interesting because we had a guy who loved World War II airplanes, much like George Lucas did in Star Wars, right?
Yes.
And he took about a month and he prevised this space battle. And I swear it was more or less approved the first time we showed it to Brad.
Yeah, when it's right, it's right.
This was, and you know what? I have a folder with the space battle previs in it, and it's empty.
Wow.
I can't find it. I'm going to keep looking.
No.
Because it is amazing how well it works as previs. And then it was really just, okay, everybody, this is what you're doing.
That's wild. I'm interested to see if I get flagged for copyright with these. Because it's straight from the episode. So, okay, I've done that before, and it if it's a straight copy of something that's released, my video will be flagged.
Should I stop playing?
I would stop this one. Yeah, the previs there's no reference for that in online.
Right. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's just dawning on me now as we go forward. So, but yeah that's all. John, I cannot thank you enough for sharing these. These are so precious to all of fandom to get a chance to see some of this stuff.
So here, I'm just going to show you.
Yeah.
So this is from the party with Richard Dean Anderson. Now, I don't have his picture here to show you. That's Bob Habros, and that's me, and that's Lorraine Rosen, who was the coordinator at one of the facilities. We threw an enormous number of parties in those days, and I actually had a lot of pictures, and I thought I really can't, I can't show.
Of course. Absolutely.
But yeah, so there you go.
This is really cool. Thank you so much for the show and tell.
Last picture. This is us at the Emmy Awards. So that's Bob Habros, Mark Savella, who's gone on to be a supervisor.
Yep.
Sandra Almond is Bob's wife, but she was my producer on Santa Claus 2 and worked with me for many years. Christine Petroff was the lead artist. Michelle Cummins, of course. Yep. Myself and David Alexander, who was our lead 3D artist and was the drummer for Lowest of the Low, if you remember them as a Toronto band.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
And actually, here we are the next day after losing.
What was it like going to the Emmys? What was that experience
like? I've been
like?
lucky. I've gone 3 times.
Okay.
I've lost every time. And you pretend it's not a thing, but you get really nervous as your category is approaching. The first time I went, I was 27 years old, and I was up for something on Friday the 13th. So my first Emmy nomination, I was 27 years old. And I remember walking in thinking, this is the nicest room I've been in my life. It was amazing. What I discovered, the one trick to the Emmys, if you ever get to go, you can ask the waiters to send bottles of champagne to other tables.
Yes.
So if you know who Dan Curry is, and I'm sure you do.
Yep.
So Dan won when we didn't. And I sent a bottle of champagne over to Dan's table. And every time I see him, he brings that up. And he's like, that was the nicest thing to do. And I said, Dan, it was free. It was free. It wasn't that nice. I was expecting you to send one back, actually. When am I getting my champagne? But I went to Dan's house a couple years ago for dinner. We went out for dinner, and he showed me all of his Star Trek stuff.
Yeah.
And that was pretty damn cool.
Are you a Trekkie?
I'm a Trekkie from the original series.
Okay.
I did Shatner's Tech War.
Yep.
And if you get me drunk, I have lots of really good stories for that. here we are at one of the award shows. So that's part of the crew.
Uh,
We went to a lot of awards with the Stargate shows. There's James Titchener.
yeah.
Yep.
Longer hair James.
Yeah. We went to Havana last year on a commercial drive.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's Bruce Turner, who was he was a supervisor on Poltergeist. He managed my Vancouver office, and now he's in Montreal somewhere.
Okay.
We're holding a check, our first check on the show. We tried to buy the coffee truck, but they wouldn't sell it to us. Jean-Luc Dinsdale, myself, Simon, and Bill Choi. Bill Choi worked on season 2 or 3 possibly for a while. And we're watching our monitors. We're blowing something up.
Oh.
So that's me in an Outer Limits episode. And there is Jonathan Glasner.
John Glassner.
Jonathan and I get together when I go to LA. We sometimes go out to lunch. We have the same initials and similar personalities. So we get along really well.
He's doing really great now. With his sci-fi series. So.
Yeah. Rob
Cooper. Yeah.
And one of the parties with his wife. Simon Lacey. I have a good Brad Turner photos or Brad Wright photo somewhere, but don't know where it is. Well, anyway, I'm sure you guys have to go.
No, I've got questions.
Oh shit! Well, go.
Yeah,
I've
got. If you can return to your image for me.
Going there.
Okay.
Stop and share.
I've definitely got some for you. You still have some time?
I do.
Okay. Alrighty. Let's see here. I've got questions from fans. Dwayne Haskett wants to know, John, how far has the technology changed since Atlantis? I mean, is your mind kind of blown, or is it like, this is normal? This is a normal rate of development, technology-wise, with the volume now. I mean, the work that's been done on that thing, just reflections are no longer green. You know, it's
right. Of course,
mind-blowing.
Yes, technology has changed a lot, and we all know Moore's law, right? Every 18 months, processing speed basically doubles. Now, in truth, that hasn't been the case. But what has been happening is software is written more efficiently. Okay. So Moore's law continues to have effects. But I'll tell you the big, and you've noticed this, I'm sure, in the Stargate days, especially when I was doing it, we would be doing shots. But now we do scenes. So in the old days on a Stargate episode, we might have 50 shots, like 100 shots was a big episode. But 100 shots on Superman happens every single week. Yeah. And one of the reasons is, remember I told you computers cost $1 million?
Yeah.
So those were flames. Those were infernos. And I only had 5 of those. Most companies didn't have much more, although the really big companies did. PCs came out, and you could buy a PC running Shake for $10,000. So the barrier to entry, if you wanted to get into the visual effects market, wasn't 10%. It was 1%. What I spent to put an artist in a seat, my competitors would spend 1% to put an artist in a seat. So there was a writer's strike. As we all know, there's a writer's strike now. There was a writer's strike back around 2002, 2003. And a lot of companies, including myself, we all went out of business because we had these $1 million machines. We were paying tens of thousands of dollars a month. And somebody can go in with PCs, and after the strike was over, they were all set to go. So one of the big changes in visual effects is simply the number of machines that are out there, which means the number of artists that were out there. We struggled to find artists. Very few people knew how to work this equipment, knew how to work this software. We ran training programs, and it went something like, we would pick 4 students 4 times a year. We set up the training so that you had to work together. But right at the very beginning, we tell you we're only keeping 2 of you, which is kind of a dick move. But it puts a lot of pressure on people because you want to know who can survive under that kind of pressure. Mm-hmm. It forces you to work collaboratively because that's what we do for a living. Mm-hmm. And then we want to see what we do. So over 8 weeks, we would teach them how to use the tools, but also how to do rotoscoping, how to do arcing. and things that we could use every week. But now the schools are punting out thousands of students a year, which has led to this huge explosion in visual effects. Partially volume, there's just more shots, but also in quality. On $1 million machine, you can only work so many days on a shot before you've blown the whole budget. But on a couple of $1,000 machine, on a 10,000 machine, you can work for a week or 2 or 3 or 4 if you need to, in order to make those shots absolutely great. So it's the drop in price that brought a lot more firepower to the industry.
Do you think it's easier for? Do you think so? The barrier to entry for more creative people has lowered, and so it's easier for people to get a shot.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, there's probably 1,000 jobs open in Vancouver. I mean, not right now because of the strike, but traditionally, we can't find enough people. If your fans are thinking of getting into visual effects, it's like the rest of the known universe, it's expanding.
Wow, that is so cool. Lockwatcher says the Kawoosh was incredible. It's Stargate's stamp. Beyond that, what effect on Stargate that either you created or after you left do you consider to be absolutely amazing to this day?
Well, first I'll tell you a funny story. We didn't call them Kawooshes.
Yeah.
We called them Kachings because they were so expensive to do. So we could only afford like 3 Kachings in a big episode. You know, the puddle was interesting, and this will also speak to the technology question. When we started doing the pass-throughs, right, when people walk through the gate was a CG object, was made in Maya, which might have been called Power Animator in those days. I can't remember when the software switched. It was probably Maya. But the ripples, there was a tool that did ripples, but you could only get 3. So if you watch the early gate shots, sometimes somebody would pass through and there'd be 3 ripples. Then you think, well, there should be more. That was a limitation of the software. We could go in and program more and do more, but that became exponentially more expensive. So I think a lot of the stuff that we did, like for me, what we took away from Stargate, because Stargate was one of the earlier shows where we really had to institutionalize the creation of visual effects. Because before that, it's like, hey, dude, what are you doing? I don't know. I'm going to make a gate. But by the time we were into it, it's like, no, we need 10 of these and we need them tomorrow, you know. So you really had to, I started writing software, actually, back in those days to manage the visual effects process. And I found that the more I was able to use this tool, the more efficient the process became. So I think something you guys don't see is that, and okay, this is actually a good way to describe it. Have you heard the saying where amateurs talk about strategy, or professionals talk about logistics, and they're talking about war? So if you're talking about the Gulf War, or of course the Second World War, the amateurs talk, oh, well, you know, why didn't the Germans shoot down more bombers? Well, the pros are like, okay, we're going to bomb the ball bearing factories. It's just logistics. We're going to bomb the railways so they can't get those ball bearing. We don't have to shoot the planes down. We're going to bomb where the fuel's made so they can't fly them. The British used to send people to Switzerland and buy up all the ball bearings before the Germans could. That's how wars are won.
Yeah.
That's how TV is made. That's how movies are made. It's all about logistics. And this is something I'm really good at. Like, I'm really creative. And when I see something, I see it in seconds. And then I spend the next couple of months living up to what I promised Brad in that first meeting. And then it's really, how do we get it done? And I said this earlier, I tell people what order to do stuff in. So I think my answer here is kind of depressing, because it's not cool tools and things. It's actually an explosion in the ability to manage large projects that has made this possible.
Sisawian, what was the shot that caused you the most headaches on Stargate?
Can I say Atlantis instead?
Yeah.
Okay. So in Atlantis, in the pilot, there was this matte painting. I don't remember where it was. It was raining. We're looking across, I think, some fields, and there's a city in the distance, possibly.
Oh, it's Athos. Yeah, you're on Athos.
Yeah. Can I swear? Well, I won't. What a dog. What a dog that shot was. And we just couldn't make it work. And one of the reasons was the artist was working on it and they had a rain element, which they probably, no, I'm not even going to say that, but it was just rain on black.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it has to be really raining. So they're putting up more rain and more rain and more rain. So you'd think somebody who lives in Vancouver would know like what rain looks like. Rain isn't tons of shit falling down. Rain films like fog. Remember at the beginning of the call, what did I say? We're duplicating photographic reality. Rain doesn't film like rain. Rain films like fog. If you look into the distance on a rainy day, it's fog. There's only a little bit of rain in the foreground. These guys just were not getting it. What is wrong? So I'm in with Brad Wright and a couple of artists, and we're looking at the finals for the pilot. And that shot comes up, and Brad's like, and I start talking to him about all the good things in it. I'm lying, but we got to deliver, right?
Correct.
So I'm talking about this shot. So Brad says, okay, that's fine. We go on to the next shot. And it's maybe a 1 hour meeting, and then we're done. And at the end of the meeting, I say, Brad, that matte painting, I'm still not happy with it. And Brad Wright, he says, I am so glad you said that, because I don't like it either. Yeah. But I know that if you're trying to sell it to me, there's a reason that I don't know, and you need to finish this shot up. And I'm okay with that. I trust you 100%. But I'm glad we're going to take another kick at it. Cool. And I feel much better because it was a dog. It was a terrible shot. Remember, no shot's great until every shot's good. So we're walking out of the parking lot, and one of the artists comes driving up to me, red in the face, almost yelling, that shot was approved and you unapproved it. You're not allowed to unapprove shots. That shot was done. I said, it's not a good shot. So I was disappointed by that person's reaction, because they were more of a facility guy, and they're approaching the problem from we have to deliver everything.
Yeah. I'm
approaching it from that shot's a dog and we can do better. And I know that, and that's the kind of, that's why I do well. And I think that's why my shows look good, is I can tell when something's not working, and you can read the room. And so a lot of the visual effects industry, it's at that level, it's actually quite political.
Yeah, absolutely. I talked with Bruce Olashton a long time ago, and he was talking about rig removal. Like it's like there's cables and shots, and you have to digitally erase them. He said that was hard, but if you do it's right, hard. No one ever knows you touched it. Raj Luthra, what are some of the hardest effects to pull off?
Well, the hard ones, it's funny because we're doing some tests for rig removal for something that I can't talk about. And it's on somebody's sunglasses, you can see the film set reflected, and they need us to rebuild the actor's eyes. So these are amongst the most difficult. If a rig passes in front of an actor, we often won't even let them use that in editorial, because our rig removal may change the performance, and we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So those are amongst the hardest shots. Spaceship shots, things like that, they're technically difficult, but they're not really. They're just, you know what you're going to do. They're all hard for their own reasons. There's very few shots that go together instantly and you go, that's great. Usually there's something that doesn't work out.
You have to find your way.
You do. And one of the things I say to people is the answer is in the plate. If you're looking at a shot and you're having a problem, like what color should this be? Well, the answer is in the plate. If the shot's really warm, if the plate was shot really warm, well, let's try something really warm so they go together. And let's just start there. One thing that's interesting is when I'm hiring artists, one of the things that I look for are people who have a musical background. Because what we do is we make pretty pictures through time, right? Here comes the ship, it's dropping a bomb and it explodes. now. It doesn't explode later. It doesn't explode earlier. You have to feel it. So the artists that can do that are the really good ones. Some people just have a terrible sense of timing, and you struggle with their shots because they've sort of baked something in. It's like, oh, now it's too late, but we have to move everything.
They haven't found the tempo.
They don't. And the other thing, remember I said we used to do shots, now we do scenes. You need to cut the shots into context so that your shot has the context, has the tempo, has the timing, so that it all blends together. If it all blends together, then you can get away with murder. It's funny, we were doing, I did Slither, which was with James Gunn, and James Gunn went off to do Guardians of the Galaxy, of course, and now he's over at DC. So there was this shot where the worms were running towards a truck, and we're following it. And, we'd seen it when we shot it. We saw it in dailies. We saw it when we were editing with it. People tracked it. We were doing CG worms. We comped it. I swear, like a week before we were in the cinema, somebody looked up, it might have been me, said, holy shit, there's an apple box in frame. And I don't mean off in the corner. It was, nobody saw it.
You couldn't see it. It wasn't a part of your process.
Correct. We all have our thing that we're looking at.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh my God, hey, Sandra, do you want to paint out an apple box tonight? Because it's going to be hard.
Is that frame by frame?
Well, no. You know what you do? You create what are called patches.
Okay.
So you would look at the shot. Here's the apple box. So you would take some of the grass on this side.
Yep.
You take some of the grass, you move it over, you blend it, and then you track it.
Yeah.
What happens is when the shot's moving, there's parallax that happens.
Yep.
So then you start dropping in individual tufts of grass just to get some parallax. You go until you don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Or until
you don't
says,
notice
stop.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But then the other problem is you're focusing on it, so you see it. You need somebody else to come in. So sometimes I'll grab the producer and I'll say, hey, can you just have a look at this? And they'll look at it and say, what? You see the... No. Okay, good. We're done.
There you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
Couple more for you. I'm going to let you go.
Sure.
All right, General, no problem at all. Okay. General Maximus, with all the advances in CG, John, if
Yep.
you were to do it all again or work on a new series, would you prefer to go back using models and practical effects, or do you think you would primarily use CG in terms of how you feel about things and how the industry has moved forward?
Okay.
If you
Well,
had
that's a really good
your
question.
choice.
That's a really good question because, we've seen an epic decline in model work. And, I came from models. That's how I started. But going back to my theory that visual effects have to look like they were photographed.
Yeah.
Camera movement is a big part of the cinematic language, which sounds really pompous, but the camera's always moving, and models don't work so well when the camera's always moving. Because once you're getting into that, then you need to get into motion control. And once you get into motion control, then you're shooting things and you're laying them in. And the problem is not what you're thinking. People have become so used to, and when I say people, I mean producers, have become so used to being able to change things at the absolute last minute. If we had a model, you'd have to change the model. You'd have to shoot it again. We'd have to rent the soundstage again. We have to get all the lights back in the same place. It's not feasible. Yeah. Now, I did Santa Claus 2 a long time ago. And one thing that we did is we had a Hercules C-130 flying, and we built it in CG. And then we took the UV maps, we took the textures, we laid them out. So it was like the airplane unwrapped. We sent that to the model shop. They took an 8-foot by 8-foot piece of ply. Of course, that's 2 pieces put together for anyone who has tried to put in, you can't even buy an 8-foot. You know what I mean? And then we built the model flat on the plywood, photographed it, gave it back to 3D, and they wrapped it onto the CG aircraft. So we found ways of using the model shop. And that's what they did. That's what Dave Asling did. That's what they were doing on The Mandalorian. Some of those sets were actually models.
Wow.
And because there's a couple of reasons. And remember what I said earlier, you can build a model, take it outside and film it, and it looks real. The other thing is, it is so hard finding visual effects people, but it's easier to find model builders.
Wow.
So having said that, I would skew towards 3D because, when I said the computers were way cheaper, it's not just the computers themselves, but the render farms were cheaper. Of course, Amazon now, you can rent render power on Amazon. When I did Project Blue Book, which was a wonderful show that nobody saw, we did huge renders with Amazon. So you can get almost infinite firepower to do CG. The other thing is, the nice thing about models, especially pyro with models and blowing up models, is there's a lot of chaos that happens just naturally. And it scales. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. Don't know what that's.
You're right.
It scales nicely. Chaos is cool. It looks real. With CG, a lot of it, you have to put the chaos in, which by definition is not chaos. So it has a different feeling. So you work really hard at making things look random and getting enough variation. And to this day, when I give artists notes, my first note is usually more variation. I need bigger, I need smaller, I need brighter, I need darker. It looks too homogeneous, and that's not what the world looks like.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
A random final question from a reader, from a viewer, Matthew Robbins. Are you in any relation to Robert Gajdecki? He says, I used to work in TV production with one.
No, that's a good question. When my daughters were born, you would think this has nothing to do with your question. I got their Gmail addresses right away. Anastasia, A.Gajdecki and S.Gajdecki. I didn't have to waste my time. There's only about 50 Gajdecki's in the world. In fact, one day I was like sleeping after a party and somebody phones and goes, oh, it is Janek Gajdecki from Poland. I'm phoning all the Gajdecki's. It's like, call me later. Call me dad. No, but I'd like to meet him because there's only a few.
Right.
And he's probably pretty good.
There you go. John, this has been so insanely cool. What are you working on right now that you're once the writer strikes, everything is on hold. I know you guys are dealing with that. And what of your recent work are you most proudest of that we should go take a look at?
My favorite show in years was Project Blue Book.
Yeah.
And if you guys had a chance and looked at my reel, there's a lot of Project Blue Book stuff. The battleship scene was just super cool. And it was great to be able to work on shots that were at that level. We worked at a much higher level there than we did on, Superman, which was because Blue Book was a streaming show. Superman was a network show. So Superman was more about getting the work done. Now, Superman still looks super cool, and there's a lot of good action scenes in there. But really, Project Blue Book was probably my favorite. Also, the material, military, 1950s, lots of environments. We would look at an airbase and they say, well, blah, blah, blah. We're doing, this episode is set at this airbase. And I could say, well, these are the aircraft that would have been flying out of that base at the time. And on a show like that, I got to fly down, like for the last episode, there was a battleship. It was an Iowa class battleship. So I went down to LA and I shot textures on a real battleship. At the end of the first season, there was I think they were F-89s, but it was the B model and they had one at Dayton, Ohio. So I went to Dayton, Ohio and shot textures of the real airplane.
Yep.
So I really enjoyed that. That was one of my favorite shows. Now, Superman was a favorite show, Superman and Lois, for a different reason. And that was the stories were great. It's a really good take on the Superman and Lois franchise. And the visual effects were massive and really, really supported the story. So they were good for different reasons. I'm less of a comic book guy, though. So I skew towards the military and the history.
Perfect for Stargate.
Well, yeah. Oh, well, dude.
It's both.
So, I've heard they might make another one. I don't know.
MGM and Amazon, I imagine it's just a matter of time. We're just sitting here waiting. And I
Yeah.
know, Brad, I can't, if there is something going on, he's not going to talk about it. I hope that they're doing something with him, because otherwise anything else is criminal. So, yep.
Well, yeah, so that'll be cool. That'll
Yeah.
be cool. But the writer's strike, of course, is causing a lot of disruption.
Yep.
Superman and Lois might not go until February. They don't think the strike is going to end. So a lot of people in the industry, like me, I'm not going to be very busy for the rest of the summer, possibly the rest of this year. So it's an interesting situation. You know what? That happened during COVID. I had no work for 8 months.
Spinning
We
your
were
wheels.
just about to start season 3 on Blue Book, and it got canceled. Then you go, what do you do? Because nothing is starting up.
Yeah.
So you make sure that your wife is in a different industry. My wife used to manage big post houses in Manhattan when we met, and now she works in a different industry, which is a really good move for, I don't know, today. Because so, that's the thing about visual effects is there's a lot of work, and every few years it just vanishes because something happens. And that's just the way it is. And so long as you can tolerate ambiguity, which is a really important personality trait for people in the industry, you'll be fine.
Yep.
Oh, and you have to be really, really good.
Oh, of course. This has been really cool. I've been following along with the chat. People are really, really tickled with all the stuff that you brought to bear. Not just the visuals, but your stories as well. I would love to have you back, sir.
I would happily do it. And I'll tell you, I'm sitting here until December, possibly. So
we'll have you back.
If you need, if you can schedule me in one more time, I'll try and find some more stuff.
All right. So John, this has been such a treat. Thank you again for your body of work. All of the stuff that you have contributed to this franchise over the years has been a huge part of why we love it so much. So I really appreciate your time, sir.
It's great that everybody loves it. It's actually really neat to be on a show like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time. Thank you, John. Be well. John Gajdecki, visual effects supervisor on Stargate SG-1 and Atlantis. Tickled to have him for this episode. I really want to thank the folks who are involved in making this possible every single week. I've got Tracy and Anthony who are moderating this episode. Really appreciate you guys having my back while we make the show possible up front, as well as Summer, Jeremy Reese, my web developer, Frederick Marcoux at Concepts Web. He keeps Dial the Gate running. And that's what we've got. We have tomorrow David Hewlett. He's joining me to discuss the rise of artificial intelligence, this explosion of content that is now at the fingertips of private citizens, and how we're beginning to watch an acceleration happening of AI being involved in more and more industry. So David Hewlett, who played Rodney McKay on Stargate Atlantis, he's going to be joining us to discuss some of those trends and how we kind of feel about things moving forward. So that's going to be tomorrow, July the 9th at 12 noon Pacific time. So I hope you can join us for that one. And David will also take your questions live. And then on Monday, July the 10th at 8 a.m. Pacific time, Heather E. Ash, writer and story editor for Stargate SG-1. She'll be discussing her episodes and will answer your questions as well. My thanks once again to John Gajdecki for joining me for this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate, and I'll see you on the other side.